Good morning, everyone. I call to order this 18th meeting of the Public Utility Commission for calendar year 2012 and ask that you all join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get into the official business with approval of the minutes, we joined together as fellow commissioners here this morning with great sadness. And we'd like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to a friend and former colleague, Chairman Bill Shane. As many of you know, Chairman Shane was involved in a tragic automobile accident last week on his way into Hershey. And I just want to share with you our condolences and ask that we all take this opportunity to join together in a moment of silence. Thank you. Now, I want to recognize this outstanding individual. We have behind us a little video that Lori's showing. But what I was amazed about, just looking at Chairman Shane's bio, first of all, he's held an undergraduate degree from Harvard, also went to the University of Pennsylvania Law School, so he was certainly all Ivy. Served with distinction in the Pennsylvania House from 1971 to 1976. He was an Indiana Borough Council member. He was an Indiana County Commissioner. He was president of the Indiana County Center to Feed the Hungry. As I understand, and I'm going to recognize the historian here in a moment, he was the PUC's first chief administrative law judge. He served here as a commissioner from 1984 to 1990, and then came back in 2005 to serve in 2006, and was chairman of this commission from 1987 to 1990. And my esteemed colleague reminded me to note that he was an avid Y member. I understand that he's tracked a lot of miles along the river here in Harrisburg. More importantly, he was a steadfast advocate for low-income customers here in Pennsylvania. I look out in the room, I see people like Terry Fitzpatrick, Arlene, and others who worked with Chairman Shane. And I hear all the stories. I think we're going to have to, this year, in honor of him, bring back the St. Patrick's Day party. I know we're not allowed to have libations in the office, but we can go off campus for that. But I understand there was something about green beer, and that sounds, about a couple hours from now, that sounds like a good thing. But he was, I heard he was a remarkable individual. I knew he was a remarkable individual. Any guy that could wear a bow tie the way he did, you knew he was special. I read the comments this weekend. Tom Charles circulated them around. But Republicans and Democrats alike, from Senator Don White to many people back in Indiana County, this guy was a true legend, a true statesman, and he will never be forgotten here at this commission. And with that, I want to recognize a colleague who served with Chairman Shane, and now I'd like to recognize Commissioner Cawley for some remarks.
Thank you, Chairman. It's with sadness and great affection that I remember Bill Shane. I had the privilege of serving with him for about a year, 1984 and 85, but had known him during the deliberations in the Senate and creation of major reforms to the Public Utility Code. And certainly my mentor, Franklin Curry, who is here today, responsible for those reforms, knew Bill Shane very well. And then I had the privilege of serving with Bill again when we both came back on the commission in 2005. So many of us remember Bill with affection. He was bald of pate, he was bespectacled, he was tall and very solidly built. He was a man of enormous energy and drive. He didn't have a desk in his office, at least not the first time. He would have a stand-up desk. He was so nervous of energy that he had to keep moving and just couldn't sit down. He was a jogger and a marathoner and a swimmer, a very athletic person. Less known is the fact that he was a deeply religious man. He was an elder in the Presbyterian Church back home. During his second term, he stayed at the Presbyterian Apartments here on 2nd Street. More about that in a minute. He really was a person larger than life. He once told me that his true ambition as a young man was to be a Broadway dancer. But then he would look at his feet, which were very large, and he would just laugh. But he truly was. He had such an aspiration. It was true. And we all remember that stutter-start way that he walked to get that big frame of his down the walk. He appeared clumsy until he started running, and he would somehow stay upright. He had an extraordinary sense of humor, one of the most unusual I have ever seen. And when he had a very ready laugh, too. You saw a little bit of it in one of the pictures here. And it was almost impossible to anger him. You could ridicule him, and it was like Teflon. You couldn't make him mad. And I remember one time I was kidding him about his bow ties. And I said, Bill, the only thing that you need extra with your bow tie is a beanie with a propeller on top. And he just howled. You couldn't make him mad. And he was very proud of his bow ties. He had a vast collection of them. And just to get his goat once in a while, I say, surely that's a clip-on. Well, I mean, that was a challenge. He'd immediately take it off and then retie it again just to show you that he knew how to tie a bow tie. I would say to him, Bill, because I would get so exasperated with him sometimes, because once he made up his mind, it was very difficult to get him to change it. I'm going to say, Bill, people call you ready, fire, aim. And he would just howl. He didn't care. He was so certain of himself. It would get him into trouble once in a while. I mean, he really was frequently wrong, but never in doubt. And he didn't care if you told him that. He was just very certain of himself. But speaking of his sense of humor, in 2005 or 6, he decided that we should have a retreat among just the 5 commissioners. So he arranged for us all to meet, just us, on the top floor of a meeting room at the Presbyterian Towers. And he promised entertainment at the end of the deliberations. And we thought it was going to be some senior choir singing hymns, when in fact it turned out that he had arranged with someone called the Birdman, an individual in Harrisburg who collected birds, mostly parrots. In fact, the Harrisburg police and the coroner and all of the funeral directors all know of this man, a former Navy pharmacist who never married, who lived at the Presbyterian Apartments. And when an elderly person would die with a parrot, they would, and no one wanted it, they would give this bird and the cage to the Birdman. So this man had a collection of a dozen at least of parrots of all sizes and shapes. And this man earned his living by having the birds perform tricks. One of which included having a half a dozen of them cling to various parts of Commissioner Kim Pitson-Grilly's clothing, and another one sitting on top of her head, which she was mortified, but she was a good sport and went through it. But this was Bill's idea of entertainment. I told you, he was larger than life. He could be very gracious and considerate. I recall in 2005, we came back together. The vice chairmanship was open, and in an executive session, he immediately said, Jim, and everyone, I think Jim ought to be the vice chairman. When in fact, he was 10 years older than I. He had been a state representative. He had been the first chief administrative law judge at the commission. He had come to the commission 2 years before I had, in 1977, and I came in 1979. Very gracious of him. He could have pulled rank very easily, but he didn't. He felt when someone asked him to write a letter of recommendation, it should be a handwritten letter. He wrote left-handed in this very legible, loopy handwriting. And in fact, I saw some of those letters. And I have notes from him wishing me well. I'm glad I kept them. He can also be maddeningly abrupt and outrageous. I left the commission in 85. He was chairman from 87 to 90. I recall vividly a case where I represented AT&T, and the commission had ordered AT&T to take its customer service number off the bill and instead use Bell of Pennsylvania's customer service number. So all AT&T customer complaints would have to go through Bell of Pennsylvania first. Those were the days when Bell of Pennsylvania did the billing, and the long-distance companies' bill would also be tacked on to the Bell bill. Well, AT&T did not want its customers dealt with by anybody but its customer representatives. There was a vacancy on the commission at the time. There were only four serving. The vote was 2-2 on Bill's motion to tell AT&T to remove the number from the bill and to use Bell's number. Tie vote. The law provides that a majority of commissioners serving in accordance with law is required for any order. So essentially nothing happened. There was a tie vote in public session. It didn't deter Bill. He was so convinced of his motion that he bellowed out in public meeting, looking straight at me in the front row, AT&T, take that number off the bill. We felt the need, and we did obtain an injunction in the Commonwealth Court to prevent the Commission from acting further. And on the merits, AT&T eventually prevailed and kept its number on the bill. In fact, it's somewhat of a precedent because normally you need a written order to have a final order that's appealable. So it stands for the proposition that an unwritten action by the Commission can constitute a final order that's appealable. I would remind Bill of that later, and he'd just laugh. He would just laugh. So I could go on and on. I won't, and I couldn't possibly capture all of the accomplishments and warm feelings that I have and so many at this commission and in Harrisburg have for Bill Shane. He was always endearing. He was occasionally exasperating, but he was always caring for his fellow man, and he was always interesting. Let me close by describing a poster that he gave me soon after he and I came back here in 2005. This is a day in the life poster that was printed and distributed in 1990 by the Natural Gas Supply Association in Washington. And it epitomizes what public utility commissions around the country had been feeling for the entire 1980s. A time of high inflation, a time of many, many rate cases, in fact, one right after another, so the utilities could maintain their profitability within that zone of reasonableness that the Constitution requires. So we were all feeling very besieged. So this is a poster of a PUC in a tower, and the legislature is shooting at us, the governor's office is shooting at us, the gas and water companies are auguring and undermining the foundation of the castle. The pipeline companies are using a battering ram on the front door. It's humorous. But if you were a regulator in the 80s, this was quite a poignant example of the way we felt. We were always vilified in the press and on TV. I admired it. It was on Bill's wall in his office. I admired it, and he gave it to me. And the last day that he was here, hoping for renomination, which never came, he inscribed it on the back. I can't read it. So I've asked because I'll get too emotional. So I've asked the vice chairman to read the inscription, which I think epitomizes Bill Shane.
If you have not seen this, you really need to take a moment. It's a great poster with lots of familiar-looking characters in it. The one I find kind of interesting is here's Ma Bell down here in the lower corner, and here's Baby Bell. So there are some recognizable companies here in the poster. But take a moment, if you haven't seen it, take a moment to take a look at it after a public meeting today. The inscription on the back reads, "To Jim, colleague in regulation, foil and happy protagonist in joyful intellectual debate, ally in seeking justice and compassion, and friend in public service. Signed, Bill 8806. It's a wonderful piece.
And with that, I'd like to now recognize we're going to have a quick video. Thank you. I did note, I thought I saw in that photo, Joe Clea was in there. Joe, are you out there? So the first item this morning on the agenda is the approval of the September 13th minutes. And Commissioner Gardner, I believe you are the editor of the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have reviewed the minutes of the September 13th, 2012 public meeting and move that they be approved as submitted.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as submitted. It's a pleasure to welcome to the podium here this morning to begin public meeting Ms. Cheryl Walker Davis. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. May it please this Honorable Commission, on behalf of your various offices and bureaus, we present for your consideration and disposition the following agenda items. Commencing this morning with matters on behalf of the Bureau of Technical Utility Services, it is recommended in omnibus fashion that the Commission adopt all items appearing on pages 1, 2, and 3 through and including the tariff filing of the Sinclair Moving and Storage, Inc.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On behalf of the Bureau of Audits, it is recommended that the Commission adopt all items appearing on page 4 through and including the Pennsylvania Electric Company non-utility generation charge.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On behalf of the Office of Special Assistance, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the first item, the one item appearing on page 5, as well as the first item appearing on page 6. It should be noted that the second item pertaining to the Bureau of Transportation and Safety versus Madeline Ciabationi, TA Reading Express Airport Shuttle, has been postponed until public meeting of October the 24th. The omnibus continues to include all items on pages 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 through and including the recommendation with regard to the amendment to the interconnection agreement of New Singular Wireless and Armstrong Telephone.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On behalf of the Bureau of Technical Utility Services, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the items appearing on pages 12 and 13 through and including the security certificate of the Metropolitan Edison Company.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
At the top of page 14, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the recommendation with regard to the security certificate of the Pennsylvania Electric Company, noting the statement of Commissioner Gardner.
So moved.
Second.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Gardner for purposes of a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like for my statement to be entered into the record as if I read it in its entirety. I disagree with the majority's vote to grant Penelec request to issue up to $395 million of debt securities. I believe that Penelec's filing justifies the registration of at most $320 million, of which $125 million will be used to repay short-term debt, $150 million to refinance long-term debt, and $45 million for a bond reissuance. Also, I am concerned that Penelec capitalization structure is moving out of line. Currently, it is at 55% debt and 45% equity, and if fully extended under the proposed registration, Penelec's debt ratio would rise to 58% in 2013. That is much higher than the 51% debt structure approved by the Commission's in Penelec's last rate case. Another reason for limiting the amount of debt the company borrows is its recent practice of paying dividends in excess of net income while relying on debt capitalization. Penelec made dividend payments equal to 167% of net income in 2009, 142% of net income in 2010, and 111% in 2011. For the foregoing reason, I respectfully dissent.
So noted. I just want to state for the record that I support Penelec's financing, specifically noting the timing in a very low interest rate environment, which is going to result in utility appropriate capital structures for utility rate making presently and going forward. The higher dividend payout ratio in previous years effectively brought the equity ratio down to a reasonable 45% benchmark, and it's not forecast to continue. And flexibility, as we know, in financing with appropriate regulatory oversight should be encouraged. So I just want to note that for the record. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, noting the motion passes 4-1, noting the dissent of Commissioner Gardner.
Mr. Chairman, may we please go back to page 12 for a moment? It appears as though an item pertaining to IDT Energy, Inc., which was an amended application, was intended to be postponed. Accordingly, it is recommended that the Commission reconsider its adoption of the staff recommendation and instead postpone this matter until public meeting of October the 24th.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Cawley.
just to do it officially, I move that we reconsider the vote by which we approve the application of IDT Energy, Inc. on page 12 of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Motion passes unanimously. We'll get back to the agenda. We were on page 14 of the agenda.
Continuing with the items, on behalf of the Bureau of Technical Utility Services, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the remaining 3 items on page 14, as well as all items on page 15 through and including the application of the Norristown Telephone Company.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On behalf of the Law Bureau, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the recommendation to record and enter into the minutes of public meeting the Commission's secretarial letter granting the petition for clarification filed in the Metropolitan Edison Company preceding their appearing.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On behalf of the Office of Administrative Law Judge, it is recommended that the Commission adopt all items appearing on pages 17, 18, and 19 through and including the recommendation with regard to the Pennsylvania Electric Company non-utilities generation charge rider reconciliation statement.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
That does conclude the presentation of regular agenda items. Turning now to the carrying agenda, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the recommendation with regard to the amended opinion and order in the First Energy Default Service Plan proceeding.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the presentation of public meeting agenda items.
And I believe we have one announcement, a big announcement, just to remind everybody, on Wednesday, October 24th, which is we moved public meeting up a day, we're going to observe the Commission's 75th anniversary. And immediately following public meeting, we're going to have a little ceremony here in Hearing Room 1. But I'm proud to report for the PUC groupies that are out there, this is who we have coming back. So if you have your PUC baseball cards, you can get your autographs. Let me go with the lineup. Former Vice Chairman Bob Bloom, former Vice Chairman Ty Christie, Chairman Terry Fitzpatrick, Chairman Wendell Holland, Commissioner Kim Pizzangrilli, Chairman John Quain, Chairman Susan Shaneman, Chairman Linda Talafari, and Chairman Glenn Thomas. And as I mentioned earlier, after the ceremony, we're going to have a reception in the atrium, and we're going to take a little group picture. I would remind all my regulated utilities out there, please do not mock us. I know some of you might have voodoo dolls of some former commissioners, but please, I want you on your best behavior for the 75th anniversary celebration. By the way, you can all laugh. I know it's been a somber day, but there are any other items to come before the Commission here this morning?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Hearing none, we are adjourned.